Hello, everyone. I'm Alex Williams of the New Stack. We are here for, once again, the Prisma Cloud Native Security Summit, the State of Cloud Native Security, brought to you by Prisma Cloud, by Palo Alto Networks. Now I am joined for a conversation with Darian Jenik, who is Risk Product Security Lead Architect for Public Cloud Migration at Refinitiv. And we are discussing with Darian how Refinitiv uses Prisma Cloud as a foundation for its custom cloud security reporting app. Nice to have you here, Darian.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for having me. It's not much of a demo, but it is about how we use the data that we pull out of the Prisma public cloud tool, which works really well for us. But no tool can really understand your own internal organizations, especially the way we do. So we had to massage the data, but it becomes very useful once we do that for us. So,
I'm really curious on how you're using this technology and how you came to decide to architect it. We see a world where, governed access is part of our lives, but also pervasive data is part of our lives. We really need protection for it. We need protection for the data, the apps, the hosts, the containers. And you're using serverless architecture, so I'm curious about that. But I'm wondering how this is a solid foundation for your journey to the cloud, or for any company's journey to the cloud, and how you thought about Prisma, which is really emerging as the industry's most comprehensive cloud security suite, and how it helps customers accelerate their journey with risk visibility and continuous security. But before we get started, I wanted to ask you a little bit about Refinitiv. Can you tell us about Refinitiv and what drove your company to consider a third-party solution like Prisma Cloud in the first place?
Yeah, sure. Well, Refinitiv, it's basically what used to be the data arm of Thomson Reuters. So we have a lot of data. We move it to customers. Most of the top financial institutions, if not all of them, are our customers. We provide them data that they require for their regulatory obligations. On top of that, we have one of the world's largest trading platforms. And basically, we're a giant data arm. And we used to capitalize on that when we were part of Thomson Reuters. We got split off. And that meant that we had to look at how do we divest ourselves from the data centers. And of course, cloud was the main answer. We have a very agile team of developers who like to push things out quickly. They need to. Very responsive to the business. But the problem was, in our early days, we weren't taking a careful look at what everyone was doing. We didn't, like all organizations, we were trying to do a lot of things manually. Sometimes, there was a lot of scripts that I'd written to talk to the Amazon interface and to pull out data so that we could have a look and say, okay, well, this shouldn't be here. These things shouldn't be exposed and all of that. And that's just not sustainable, not for an organization our size, or actually for most organizations. We've got 200 cloud accounts in excess of, over 1 million things deployed in those accounts. Your scripts just can't cover it. As much as you'd like to think that you can capture the major parts of it, we needed a tool. We needed something specialist that was going to find and identify those things that could be a problem for us going forward. So that's when we started on our journey looking for that. And we did look. This was over 1.5 years ago. We did look at all of the major brands, and back then when it was Prisma Cloud, it went by a different name, and it ticked all the right boxes for us. It allowed people to see what was going on, and that was important, and see what had changed. Our operations team were very crucial to making that decision.
I would love to just ask you a little bit about your scripts that you were using before, and how you need and why you need to make that shift to more automated capability. What were some of the hurdles you were facing? What were some of the problems you were encountering?
For a start, the scripts aren't multi-cloud, right? So with all the best will in the world, I'm not an expert in all three clouds, and we were using all three clouds: Amazon, Google, and of course Azure. And the time invested in building these scripts, a simple thing like show me all of my S3 buckets that are world readable. Uh, and then connecting to 200 other accounts and doing that. That's a lot of time invested in internal development work that just simply isn't valuable to us. We don't want to spend that kind of money. It would cost us a lot of money. And even then, you're only going to get a limited data set, whereas something like Prisma Cloud, which has hundreds and hundreds of different rules that you can then customize and tailor to your environment, gives you a great starting point. I mean, I wouldn't want to be in the position of saying, match our policies to a set of scripts I've written. I'd much rather be in the position of saying, look at all these different rules that have been provided to us. What can we tune, and what does it tell us that we didn't know? It's mostly about knowing what you don't know. And we could clearly see that there was a large gap between our desire to build custom scripts and, say, an expert, industry piece of technology that has all of this built for us.
Well, cool. So I would love to switch gears a bit into this custom built reporting application that you've built. Can you give us a bit of background on it before we move to the demo?
Yeah, sure. When we've got hundreds of apps in the cloud, a lot of them sharing cloud accounts, you still need to, the key part of the problem is who do I nail down to say this is your problem? I can't just throw a large report at them and say, hey, guys, find your stuff in here and fix it. I have to be very specific about this belongs to this team, right? And no tool is going to understand how we, because we tag our deployments where it's not possible to tag them. We have naming schemes, so it's not possible for a tool to come along and suddenly pull out hundreds and hundreds of different tags and naming schemes and things like that and make a sensible report out of it where only the data that's shown to the dev teams that is relevant to them, they get to see. So having had a look at the fact that we could talk to an API in Prisma Cloud, and it's got a great search language, that you can build your own reports and queries with, we pull the data down on bulk and then use a lot of internal logic. It's written in Python. It's nothing that special, but the end result is I can generate a report for a team as they're building. They get weekly emails or daily emails if something bad triggers, and they get told straight away during the development cycle that this can't be. There's no point waiting for the teams to deliver their application and then run an audit on them and then tell them they have to fix something. That's never going to make you any friends, and it's not going to help with our delivery schedules. It turns back to security people becoming Dr. No again. We don't want to do that. So as they start building it, they start getting their reports, and they fix it as part of the development pipeline. It shouldn't be anything more complex than that. So
it's not just build it all and then start getting reports. You want them to make it an iterative process.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way at all, because usually the teams are, they're running into deadlines. There's hard deadlines set by our product teams saying, get this out. Perfect example, we've got one out, it's due out next week. There's no chance by the time the teams finish their apps, tests their apps, runs through all the, checks that it's working, it's been through the test cycles, it's got the data, and there's no point coming to them then 2 days before they're due to go to release and say, oh, by the way, you have to fix these things. That never happens. And in a practical world, sometimes teams would be tended to say, well, we can't fix it, we might fix it in 6 months. That's not an acceptable risk posture for us.
Right. And that speaks to that issue of time, really, doesn't it? And why you need these iterative processes, which is a hallmark of, a DevOps approach.
Yep, absolutely. And so, it's getting the right data to the right people and holding them accountable for it. They can't say they weren't told earlier on in the process.
Okay, Darian, I'd love to see this demo. What have you got?
Sure. What we've got is we take the data out of Prisma Public Cloud and we grade it into a team. For example, this is a dummied up report. I've edited it, cut it out, cut some random alerts in there just to make it look a bit more realistic. And one team is in charge of these 3 accounts and a particular application. And you can see that there's, new ones coming in for the last week. ones that are being resolved. When you pop over to the application, you can have a look at through the what the alerts are. I mean, these are pretty simple, but you can pop over and have a look at the details, and you can see that, okay, fine, this is allowing these traffic from the internet. That's why we're getting the alert. We can go have a look at it. We can either whitelist it because that was intentional, or we can go back and say, okay, fine, this needs to be resolved, raise some tickets from it. And it even gives the teams some resolution information here, so they can click around, have a look, see what they need to do. They don't always know what they need to do, and the easier you make it for the teams, the more likely they are to go and fix it straight away, rather than thinking, oh geez, I have to go off to this website, read some documentation, things like that. So it's very important. How we address this is by making sure that all this information belongs to one team, and that's the work they had to do to basically remediate this. So those are the reports that get sent out internally.
So when you're looking at this demo, you did build it in-house. You used Prisma Cloud. How did you get the data, out of Prisma Cloud into your application? What are the technologies that you're using there?
It's very simple. Prisma Cloud provides a nice REST API for us. They have a great query engine internally that you can do. So you can say, hey, show me all the alerts for this and this and this relating to that. Pull it out. Then we normalize it in-house, looking for our internal tags, looking for who created it, who the ownerships are. There's quite a fair bit of logic there. It's a couple of thousand lines of Python sitting there, carefully identifying who belongs to what, what's associated with what, and that's how we can confidently say, hey, this is your report. I don't think I've had a team come back and say, this is not mine. They might come back and say, we meant to do that, or oh, didn't know we were doing that. But we've been successful in the fact that yes, they've owned up, this is their problem. And that's really important, because you don't want to be sending them other people's information. You don't want them sitting there thinking, oh, is this mine? Maybe I can, maybe it's not mine. You want to be very confident that yes, your team did this, and yes, your team needs to fix it.
How did you find the integration of the Prisma Cloud API?
It's really good. It's over the couple of years that we've been using it, they've been evolving it, which is brilliant, because it's not a product that's standing still. The report generation ability, what we can pull out of it, pretty much absolutely everything. And one of the wonderful things about it is it's a single source of truth for every cloud account that we have. Doesn't matter whether it's AWS, Azure, or Google. The one API allows us to do queries across absolutely every account. And that's really important to us, because I honestly do not want to have to hold 200-300 credentials somewhere sitting in the sense that I have to constantly log in and rebuild my keys to get the access. It's just not practical. Having a single source of truth, a lot of teams are benefiting from this.
When you were building this, how did you think about the policies? How did you think about providing the metrics? How did you think about providing the data to the owners? How did you think about the automation?
Well, it started off as, okay, we have the Prisma Public Cloud. Great, let's have a look at it. It's giving us some wonderful data. So, okay, how do we pull that out, turn that into something? There was a version 1 of this I wrote, which was basically a proof of concept. Built it out in a few weeks as a side of the desk thing. Showed it to a few people, absolutely loved it. Got support for it. Got a number of people helping out with it, and we turned it into into quite a large piece of It is about 10,000 lines of code back there, but we've got some modules now that we're testing for Jira ticketing. So this will automatically now raise tickets to the right teams. Again, identifying the teams is the key here, because no team wants to get hit with tickets that don't belong to them. That'll be their first complaint. So, and it's valid. So we have to pay attention to that and make sure it's getting out to the right people. And they will get tickets into their queue that they have to remediate. And this is forcing them to rethink what they're doing. Like a perfect example, one of the things was they used to build everything in a pre-prod account. This is where you do your testing, dummy data. But all of the templates for the build were the same as the prod account, which means suddenly they were exposing things to the internet while they were testing and building. And the answer is that's no longer acceptable. And once they learn that, they adjust their behaviors. They fix their templates, because you know, it's come up somewhere and someone's pointing out that that's what they need to do. Developers, you know, they don't think about these things because they're there to get the application out. We've got to teach them these good behaviors.
So what is next? What are you continuing to innovate and iterate?
I think what we're, the next piece is, now that we've rolled this out, you know, there's hundreds of reports going out, is we're refining the, you know, we are also learning. We see stuff coming on the report, then the teams push back saying we must do this, and we're learning how, you know, whitelisting is incredibly important. Having a ability to whitelist, because you don't want to get overloaded with reports, you know, alerts and reports that aren't true. You know, it's complaining about a web server. Yes, that's a genuine web server. That's a service we provide. We've got to be able to turn that off, because the teams, you know, they will get alert fatigue if we're not careful with that. We also, what we did was we created a class of alerts that's critical. You know, it's even higher than high, because, you know, it's the usual low, medium, high. Anything that exposes data to the internet is considered a critical, you know, alert. That's got to be fixed straight away. There's no excuses for that. But as we're refining the various rules and we're realizing, okay, and we are getting an enterprise view, you know, how many, for example, at the beginning, how many databases were potentially exposed to the internet? And when I say exposed to the internet, they might have been on public subnets, not necessarily actually exposed, but you want to lay a defense model, so they shouldn't be on public subnets. How much of this is going on in the organization? Is this something we have to look at? Those are the questions where, you know, myself and the security teams that are involved in this, we're looking at that and refining our ability to understand what's going on. You know, things that we considered back in the early days, you know, that's a medium alert. We'll do the important stuff first. We're returning back to that. This isn't going to stop. You know, we're never going to have teams that are going to be building things 100%, and we acknowledge that. But we, you know, better documentation for the teams, guidance, templates, patterns. That's the stuff we're still building.
But I'm curious, you know, in your development of this application, what are some of your takeaways about cloud native technology, about your application, about Prisma Cloud?
Well, the takeaways are, until you have something like this, you really have no idea what's going on. And
right.
It was an important point that we drove home, because despite the fact that we were running scripts and we do use Cloud Custodian in AWS, we still use that. We weren't confident that we were seeing everything, or that we were even looking in the right places. This gives us that confidence. You know, we see alerts and stuff we hadn't considered could be happening, or we should worry about. So it's taught us that you really don't know what you don't know until you get something like this. It lifts the lid, and you know, it is a little bit horrifying at first, but that's good, because now you know you've got work to do. Until then, and I'm afraid I guarantee you, I know quite a few organizations that don't use this. They really don't understand how bad it could be going on there, because they're not looking. You need to look. It's like saying, wow, you know, I'm sure we're patched, because we've told all the teams to patch. Yeah, that's great. How are you testing it? Where's your scanning? You're not doing scanning? You can't tell me it's patched, please. You know, it's the same story in security, just given a new layer because of the public cloud. We can't not know what's going on. That's just not acceptable.